It's just past midnight on December the 30th, 1916 in Petrograd, the imperial capital of Russia. The temperature has plunged to minus 22 degrees Celsius, and the Moika River is frozen solid beneath layers of snow. Inside the basement of the Moika Palace, owned by one of Russia's wealthiest princes, a gramophone plays Yankee Doodle to mask any sounds that might escape. Pink cakes dusted with cyanide sit on china plates. Bottles of Madeira wine, each laced with enough potassium cyanide to kill 5 men, wait to be poured. 5 aristocrats check their revolvers one final time. Their target will arrive in exactly 45 minutes. A Siberian peasant who has become the most powerful man in Russia, the most hated man in Europe, and according to his enemies, the devil incarnate. That night, Prince Felix Yusupov and his conspirators would attempt to murder Grigori Rasputin, shooting him, poisoning him, beating him, and finally drowning him in the frozen Neva River. But Rasputin would not die easily. We've reconstructed the entire assassination to show you the minute-by-minute timeline of how Russia's elite tried to kill a man they believed possessed supernatural powers, and how his death would help trigger the complete collapse of the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty. To understand why 5 members of Russia's highest nobility were willing to risk everything to murder one peasant, we need to understand how Grigori Rasputin went from an illiterate Siberian farmer to the man who whispered in the Empress's ear and decided the fate of ministers. And to understand that, we need to go back to a tiny village called Pokrovskoye, where a strange child claimed he could speak to God. Grigori Yefimovich. Rasputin was born on January 21st, 1869, in Pokrovskoye, Siberia, a village so remote it took 3 weeks to reach the nearest city. His parents, Efim and Anna, were peasant farmers who couldn't read or write. Of their 9 children, only 3 survived past infancy, not unusual for Siberian peasants where child mortality reached 60%. Grigori grew up sleeping above the stove for warmth, working the frozen fields from age 7, watching wolves prowl the village edges in winter. But young Grigori was different. Villagers later recalled he had the sight. He could find lost horses, predict deaths, know when strangers were approaching days before they arrived. At age 11, he correctly identified a horse thief from a neighbouring village, though he'd never left Pokrovskoye. When adults asked how he knew, he said God showed him in a dream. The local priest called it devil's work. His father just beat him for attracting attention. At 18, Rasputin married Praskovya Dubrovina, a blonde peasant girl from a neighbouring village. They had 7 children. 3 survived. For 10 years he lived the typical life of a Siberian peasant, farming in summer, hunting in winter, drinking heavily year-round. Then, at age 28, everything changed. Rasputin claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to him in the fields, commanding him to become a pilgrim. He left his family and walked 2,000 miles to the monastery at Mount Athos in Greece. For the next decade, Rasputin wandered Russia as a strannik, a holy wanderer. He walked from monastery to monastery, sleeping in forests, begging for food, preaching to anyone who'd listen. He never bathed, never changed clothes, believing filth brought him closer to God. His fingernails grew black, his hair matted into ropes, his beard became a nest of lice. Yet people followed him, hundreds, then thousands, drawn by his piercing blue-grey eyes and claims of healing powers. By 1903, word of the Siberian holy man reached St. Petersburg's aristocratic salons, where mysticism was fashionable among bored nobles. Orthodox priests whispered about a peasant who could heal the sick, predict the future, and had survived multiple murder attempts by rival holy men. Bishop Hermogen of Saratov, initially sceptical, met Rasputin and declared him a true man of God. Grand Duchess Militsa, married to the Tsar's cousin, invited him to her palace. On November 1st, 1905, Rasputin met his destiny. Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra summoned him to the Alexander Palace. Their son, 4-year-old Alexei, the heir to the Russian throne, was dying. The boy had haemophilia, his blood wouldn't clot. A minor bruise could cause internal bleeding that would kill him. The best doctors in Europe were helpless. The boy's screams echoed through the palace as blood pooled in his joints, causing unbearable pain. Rasputin entered the nursery at 8 p.m. He told the doctors to leave. He knelt beside Alexei's bed, placed his hand on the boy's forehead, and began praying. Within minutes, Alexei stopped screaming. Within an hour, his fever broke. By morning, the internal bleeding had stopped. The doctors called it coincidence. The Empress called it a miracle. From that moment, Alexandra believed Rasputin was sent by God to save her son, and by extension the Romanov dynasty. What Rasputin actually did remains history's mystery. Some historians suggest he used hypnosis to calm the boy, reducing stress that worsened bleeding. Others note he insisted doctors stop giving Alexei aspirin, which we now know thins blood and would worsen haemophilia. Perhaps he simply had extraordinary timing, but to Alexandra the how didn't matter, only the results did. Over the next 11 years, Rasputin became indispensable to the imperial family. Whenever Alexei had a crisis, and he had many, Rasputin would appear, pray, and the boy would recover. In 1912, when Alexei was dying in Poland, Rasputin sent a telegram, "The little one will not die. Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much." Alexei recovered within days. The imperial family called him our friend. Everyone else called him the mad monk, though he was never actually a monk. But Rasputin's influence extended far beyond healing. The Empress believed he was a holy prophet whose advice came directly from God. She consulted him on everything, which ministers to appoint, which generals to promote, whether to enter World War I. "Our friend's opinions are always right," she wrote to Nicholas. Between 1915 and 1916, Russia had 4 prime ministers, 5 ministers of interior, 3 foreign ministers, 3 war ministers, most appointed or dismissed on Rasputin's advice. Meanwhile, Rasputin lived a spectacular double life. By day, he was the holy man praying for the imperial family. By night, he was St. Petersburg's most notorious libertine. Police surveillance reports, which we still have, document his activities in excruciating detail. February 19th, 1915. Rasputin left the bathhouse with 2 unknown women, did not return home until 3 a.m., March 10th. Rasputin visited prostitute Vera Trefilova at her apartment, stayed 4 hours, May 12th. Rasputin locked prostitute in his flat. She was freed by servants after screaming for help. He held orgies at his apartment where aristocratic women lined up to sleep with the holy man, believing his semen had healing powers. He called it rejoicing in God. He drank multiple bottles of Madeira wine daily, often showing up drunk to the palace. He took bribes from businessmen seeking government contracts, charging 20,000 rubles to arrange a meeting with a minister. He openly boasted, "The Tsarina kisses my hands. Whatever I want, she does." The scandal sheets, though censored, printed everything using code words. The dark one meant Rasputin. The German woman meant the Empress, who was born in Germany. Cartoons showed Rasputin with his hand up the Empress's skirt, puppeteering her. One famous political cartoon depicted the Tsar as a baby in Rasputin's arms. The implications were clear and devastating. A filthy peasant was controlling Russia through the German Empress's bed. By 1916, with Russia losing World War I catastrophically, 2 million dead, 4 million wounded, entire armies surrendering, everyone blamed Rasputin. He was a German spy, they said. He was hypnotizing the Tsar. He was sleeping with the Empress and her 4 daughters. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter anymore. Even the Tsar's own mother, the Dowager Empress Maria, demanded Rasputin's removal. Nicholas refused. "Better one Rasputin than 10 fits of hysteria a day," he said, referring to Alexandra's panic attacks when Alexei was ill. On December 2nd, 1916, Vladimir Purishkevich, a monarchist politician, gave a 2-hour speech in the Duma, Russia's parliament. "The Tsar's ministers have been turned into marionettes," he thundered. "The evil genius of Russia is Rasputin." The chamber erupted in applause. In the gallery sat Prince Felix Yusupov, the 29-year-old heir to Russia's largest fortune. Yusupov was everything Rasputin wasn't. Oxford-educated, married to the Tsar's niece, owner of 57 palaces. He was also a cross-dresser who performed in cabarets, and had likely been Rasputin's lover years earlier, though he later denied it. After the speech, Yusupov approached Purishkevich. "He must be eliminated," the prince said. "I'm willing to do it." Within a week, they had assembled their conspiracy. Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's 25-year-old cousin, Dr. Stanislaw Lazovert, a military doctor who could provide poison, and Lieutenant Sergei Sukhotin, an officer with connections. They met in Purishkevich's train car, specially designed for his medical unit. Parked at Warsaw Station, the plan was elaborate even by aristocratic standards. They would lure Rasputin to Yusupov's palace for a late-night party, claiming Princess Irina Yusupov would be there. Rasputin had been trying to meet her for years. She was considered the most beautiful woman in Russia. They'd poison him with cyanide-laced cakes and wine. If that failed, they'd shoot him, then burn his clothes, wrap his body in chains, and dump it through a hole in the frozen Neva River. The body would wash out to the Gulf of Finland, never to be found. But first, they had to win Rasputin's trust. Throughout December, Yusupov visited Rasputin repeatedly, claiming to suffer from chest pains that needed healing. Rasputin, who charged others thousands of rubles for healing sessions, treated the prince for free. He was fascinated by aristocracy, especially Yusupov, who represented everything he could never be. During their sessions, Rasputin would place his hands on Yusupov's chest, stare into his eyes with his famous hypnotic gaze, and mutter prayers. Yusupov later claimed he felt nothing but Rasputin's terrible breath. On December 16th, Yusupov made his move. "Irina has returned from the Crimea," he lied. "She was actually still there. She's heard so much about you. She's having a small party on the 29th. Very discreet. Will you come?" Rasputin's eyes lit up. Of course he would come, but he had conditions. The meeting must be secret after midnight when his watchers were gone. Perfect, Yusupov thought. Rasputin was writing his own death warrant. The conspirators spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Dr. Lazovert procured potassium cyanide from the military hospital, enough to kill a regiment. They tested it on Yusupov's dog. The dog died in minutes, foam pouring from its mouth. They transformed Yusupov's basement into an elegant dining room, complete with a bearskin rug and a crystal crucifix that had supposedly belonged to the Spanish Inquisition. They even arranged for Yusupov's servants to have the night off, except for 2 devoted footmen who would help dispose of the body. On December 29th, 1916, the day arrived. At 8 p.m, the conspirators met at the palace. Dr. Lazovert, wearing rubber gloves, carefully ground the cyanide crystals into powder. He lifted the tops off pink cream cakes and sprinkled cyanide inside, then replaced the tops. He uncorked bottles of Rasputin's favourite Madeira wine and dissolved cyanide in each. The dose in any single cake or glass was enough to kill 3 men in minutes. At 11 p.m, Prishkovich arrived from his train, carrying his savage pistol. Grand Duke Dmitri brought his Browning revolver. They did a final check of their alibis. Dmitri was supposedly at a party at the Golovins, Prishkovich at his train. They tested the gramophone upstairs, which would play Yankee Doodle repeatedly, to make Rasputin think a party was happening. At 11:50 p.m, Yusupov and Dr. Lazovert, dressed as a chauffeur, left to collect Rasputin. Meanwhile, Rasputin was preparing at his apartment at 64 Gorokovaya Street. Although he'd promised secrecy, he told his daughter Maria and his secretary Simonovich where he was going. "I'm going to see the little princess," he said, meaning Irina. He put on his best clothes, a blue silk shirt embroidered with cornflowers, black velvet trousers, and his favourite boots. He combed his beard with his fingers, having never owned a comb. He reeked of cheap cologne mixed with his perpetual body odour. At 12:30 a.m. on December 30th, Yusupov's car arrived. Rasputin climbed in, joking with the chauffeur about the cold. They drove through empty streets, past the Winter Palace, across the police bridge. At 12:45 a.m, they entered the palace through a side gate. Yusupov had positioned the car to block the view from the street. He knew the Okhrana. The secret police had followed them. As planned, Dr. Lazovert went upstairs to join the others, while Yusupov led Rasputin to the basement. "Where is Irina?" Rasputin asked immediately. "She's upstairs with guests," Yusupov replied. "She'll come down when they leave. Have some wine while we wait." For the next hour, Yusupov watched in horror as Rasputin consumed everything offered. 2 cyanide-laced cakes, 3 glasses of poisoned wine, then more cakes, more wine. Nothing happened. Rasputin complained the cakes were too sweet but kept eating. He asked Yusupov to play his guitar and sat listening to God Save the Tsar while poison that should have killed him in minutes coursed through his body. By 2 a.m, Yusupov was panicking. He excused himself and ran upstairs. "The poison isn't working," he whispered to the others. "He's consumed enough to kill a horse." "Then shoot him," Prishkovich said, handing Yusupov his revolver. Yusupov returned to the basement. Rasputin was examining the crystal crucifix. "You should look at this beautiful cabinet instead," Yusupov said, pointing across the room. As Rasputin turned, Yusupov shot him in the chest from 2 feet away. Rasputin screamed and collapsed onto the bearskin rug. The others rushed downstairs. Dr. Lazovert checked for a pulse. Nothing. "He's dead," the doctor announced. They turned off the lights and went upstairs to continue with the plan. Dmitri and Sukhotin left for Purishkevich's train to burn Rasputin's coat and hat. Purishkevich stayed to help Yusupov clean up, but at 2:45 a.m. Yusupov felt compelled to check the body again. He went downstairs alone, shook Rasputin's body, felt for a pulse. Suddenly Rasputin's left eye opened, then his right. With a roar, he lunged at Yusupov, ripping the prince's military tunic shoulder board off with his teeth, foam and blood pouring from his mouth. Yusupov screamed and ran upstairs. "He's alive! He's getting away!" Rasputin had crawled up the stairs and was staggering across the courtyard toward the gate, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. "Felix! Felix!" he was shouting. "I will tell the Empress everything!" Purishkevich ran after him with his savage pistol. His first shot missed. His second shot missed. Rasputin was almost at the iron gate. The third shot hit Rasputin in the shoulder. The fourth struck him in the head. He collapsed face first into the snow, his blood spreading in a dark pool. 2 soldiers on palace guard duty came running. "I am Purishkevich, member of the Duma," he told them. "We have just killed Rasputin, the enemy of Russia and the Tsar." The soldiers, rather than arresting him, saluted. They dragged Rasputin's body back inside. Yusupov, in a rage, beat the corpse with a rubber club, screaming, "Die, you devil!" until the others pulled him away. They wrapped the body in a blue curtain, tied it with rope, and loaded it into the Grand Duke's car. But the conspirators had made a crucial error. The train's furnace was too small for Rasputin's coat. They had to take it with them. At 3:30 a.m., they drove to Petrovsky Island, to a bridge over a branch of the Neva. They had chains but had forgotten the key to unlock them. They tied Rasputin's hands with rope, attached some weights, and pushed him through a hole in the ice. In their haste, they left his boot on the ice. They returned to the palace at 5 a.m. to find blood everywhere, on the stairs, in the courtyard, on the snow. They tried cleaning, but it was too late. Within hours, the police would arrive. The next morning, Rasputin's daughter called the Empress when her father didn't return. Police found blood on the Petrovsky Bridge and a boot on the ice. On January 1st, 1917, divers found Rasputin's body 200 metres downstream. His hands were untied. He had worked them free underwater. His lungs contained water, meaning he was still alive when thrown in the river. The autopsy found enough cyanide in his stomach to kill several men, but it hadn't been absorbed. Later analysis suggested the cyanide was old and had lost potency, or the sugar in the cakes had neutralized it. The Empress was devastated. "They have killed my peace," she sobbed. "They have killed the only one who could save Alexei." She had Rasputin buried at a chapel in Tsarskoye Selo, attending the funeral herself. She wore a locket with his picture for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, St. Petersburg erupted in celebration. Yusupov became a hero overnight. Strangers applauded him in the streets, but the Tsar couldn't let the murder of Rasputin go unpunished, even if he privately felt relieved. Grand Duke Dmitri was exiled to Persia. Yusupov was banished to his estate in central Russia. Purishkevich, protected by parliamentary immunity, remained free. Dr. Lazovert had a nervous breakdown and confessed everything to the press. None of them were ever formally charged. The assassination achieved nothing the conspirators hoped. Without Rasputin to blame, the people turned on the Tsar directly. 10 weeks after Rasputin's death, revolution erupted. By March 15th, 1917, Nicholas II abdicated. 17 months later, the Bolsheviks executed Nicholas, Alexandra, and all 5 of their children in a basement in Ekaterinburg. The 300-year Romanov dynasty was extinct. Yusupov escaped to Paris, where he lived until 1967, dining out on his story for 50 years. He wrote 2 contradictory memoirs, sued CBS for a movie about Rasputin, and opened a nightclub called La Maisonnette Russe. Grand Duke Dmitri also escaped, became a champagne salesman, and had an affair with Coco Chanel. Purishkevich joined the White Army against the Bolsheviks and died of typhus in 1920. But Rasputin had the last laugh. Before his death, he wrote a letter to the Tsar. "If I am killed by common assassins, you have nothing to fear. But if I am killed by nobles, within 2 years the Tsar and all his family will be dead." The prophecy came true almost to the day. The peasant from Siberia outlived the empire that murdered him. Today, The Yusupov Palace is a museum where tourists pay to see the basement where Rasputin was poisoned and shot. The mannequins are arranged to recreate that night. Yusupov with his guitar, Rasputin reaching for wine. The bearskin rug is still there, though the bloodstains are long gone. Tour guides tell the story with dramatic flair, though most of what they say is myth. The truth is more complex and more tragic. 5 aristocrats thought killing one peasant could save an empire. Instead, they helped destroy it. As Rasputin himself once said, "Without me, everything will collapse." On that freezing December night in 1916, as his body sank beneath the ice of the Neva, the Romanov dynasty sank with him